Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're at in this big, beautiful world we call Earth. And welcome to Benefits 3.0, series by the Behind the Premium podcast sponsored by Well Trio. Joining me is my co-host with the most, Jacob. How are you? Oh, sorry, we're just doing a quick little sound check here to make sure that we're actually working with our mics. So bear with us here for just a second. While I'm checking our mics, want to say hi?
Hey, Cody.
How was your week?
It was great.
Good. So what was the one thing that kind of stuck out for you this week?
I came across a Mark Cuban post or video from, I think it was 6 months ago or more. And one of the things he talked about in there was the responsibility of executives as it relates to healthcare. So I thought, man, that is 100% right. Because first of all, they're a fiduciary on the plan, so they have a legal responsibility. But two, they got to do the right things for their employees. And, healthcare is the second largest spend in most businesses. So it just makes sense that an executive would be pretty tied in or should be tied into the plan.
Right.
So that really hit me this week.
Right. And it's interesting that you bring that up because we've had quite a few interesting calls with C-level people this week talking about Well Trio and what we're doing in the pre-claim space of this whole broken system of the healthcare. And it's been interesting to see how many people C-level that are actually pushing us off to their HR department, their CROs, the CFOs. It's been interesting. I would say a mass majority of them. And I'm going to chalk it up to that they're just extremely busy people. And so that's why we're kind of maybe being handed off there. But I think the message of what we're trying to project to them is resonating with them very well. They get it. And I think that it's just a quick win. And I'm going to chalk it up to that. And I think that they're just on board. They're ready to get going. But there have been some conversations, I would say, looking back on my week, based upon what you just said, I feel that there are some CEOs and some CFOs that really don't know their benefits plans.
I agree. And to go back to the reason, I think it's traditionally looked at like a HR function.
Yeah.
And they kind of say, okay, benefits, health and wellness, and EAPs and employee programs, they kind of bucket all that together and they say HR's got this. I think they sort of know benefits are probably their number 2 expense, number 3 expense. But they've already kind of got that mindset of HR owns it. And then once you have that mindset, it's easy to come up with reasons not to own it for yourself as an executive. You're busy. You've got a lot of stuff going on. And I think that we've seen that at Well Trio quite often. Like you were saying, we get pushed off from CFO to HR, and the CFO will say, "This sounds great. Love it. Go talk to HR."
Yeah.
And
on camera.
We're good.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. It is interesting because they're looking at a budget, they're looking at the line items. They can't get into the weeds. And to your point, it is just a quick handoff. But I think that a lot of times too is unless your HR department team person is well versed in benefits, I think there could be a disconnect there as well.
Yeah, and I think that, my opinion, a lot of especially CFOs trust their HR teams, which they should. I mean, that's totally, you should, and that's natural and great. But I think in a lot of cases, HR teams aren't equipped or trained to handle those kinds of, maybe that's not entirely accurate. CFOs trust their HR teams, but the HR team's priorities maybe don't align with the CFOs all the time. And maybe that's the right distinction to make. And it's natural in an organization that HR prioritizes the employee welfare, training, compliance, recruiting,
Culture.
retention,
Yeah.
culture, performance management. That's a big bucket for HR to manage, right? And so their priority is that employee experience and organizational performance, where the CFO's priority is cost, right?
Right.
They care about those things, but they trust that they're being handled, and they really dive in on the cost. And so I think that creates an environment where the CFO, again, trusts the HR team, but their priorities are different. And I think that needs to be recognized at the C level to understand that that layer, the next layer below the C level, probably has different priorities, and they're pushing for different things naturally, as they should.
Yeah. And it's interesting. If you guys have not read this article, it's on Fortune, and it's why CEOs don't understand healthcare coverage and it's costing them big is the name of the title. I'll put in the description the link to the actual article. If you're a C-level, if you're an HR person, I would highly recommend that you guys go read this. I had to print off a couple of just quick little tidbits from call outs from the article, just because it was such a good thing of what Mark Cuban was kind of explaining. And I think it sets the precedence for what we're experiencing and why the healthcare system is so broke, because there's so many different silos. There's so many different facets to this whole kind of complex healthcare system that oftentimes I feel like just in any organization, it's like, oh, we're aligned with the objective and what our goal is, but I thought you were going to do it. I thought you were going to do that, and so there's a lot of disconnect there. I know for my own thing, my wife is my CEO of our family. And when it comes to healthcare stuff, when it comes to, things like that, I usually just say, hey, wife, please take care of this. And she is the boss when it comes to that kind of stuff. She owns it. She runs it. She does that kind of stuff. But in reality, like if you were to ask me, where our kids are supposed to be this week, I couldn't even tell you, right? I got a general idea, but I don't know. And I feel like if the mentality of C-level is to kind of push it off to HR, and you kind of keep doing that year after year after year, or even company after company after company, it's just compounding on that broken system to the point where you're scratching your head and you're just saying, okay, whatever. Yeah, you know what? That line item works. Let's run with it and go. And that's where a lot of the waste starts coming in.
Yeah. I think, to use your analogy, the CEOs start to lose track of where the kids are at.
Yeah.
They generally know the activities they're involved in, but they sort of lose track of like where they're at or exactly what time they need to be there. And I think there's, to a large extent, that's how organizations have to work.
Yeah.
C-level has to have a broad direction. They have to set vision, they set goals, and they have to trust that their teams are executing. I think healthcare is a bit of a different animal, and I don't think it necessarily fits in that model. And like you said, I really think that's part of the reason it gets broken. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason it's enabled to be broken inside of an organization, because as those HR teams are making decisions based on their priorities, they're presenting the options back up to the C-level. Maybe there's, these 5 plans, CEO, CFO, let's pick 3 to offer. The CFO, they're going to be looking at their priorities as it relates to those plans, which are cost balanced with employee experience and employee value. And so I think you just, as that discrepancy grows, as C-level gets less engaged with the health plan, the drift happens more. And as drift happens, that's where the gaps start happening.
Yeah.
If you were to ask a CFO about their, at a tech company, ask a CFO about their tech spend, they probably know pretty close exactly what they're spending on which services.
Right.
In a fulfillment company, you ask them how much they're spending on gas or transportation, logistics, they probably know pretty close. If you ask them what they're spending on healthcare, they probably have an idea, but a lot of CFOs that we talk to, they couldn't break it down for you. Some are really good and some can, but a lot of them just can't because they don't engage with it.
Yeah. To me, a good analogy there is if you're on a fully funded plan, the data that you get is at the end of the year, and it's all summarized, right? And it's kind of one of those line items that it's like, great, this looks good, I guess. And you just kind of say, okay, that's what our bottom line is. Oh, that's why our premiums went up. It's not really detailed, right? Whereas if you're on a self-funded plan or a level funded plan, you do have a little bit more granularity into that data, and you can view into it. With level funded, it's not real time kind of thing, like it is with a self-funded plan. And I feel like even then, what does HR do with that, right? Because you've got all these people that are looking out at the back end of things, and you're not really looking at the front end. And what do you do with this data at the end of the year? And to that point, I think it's even more of a disconnect, because you're just accepting, okay, this is just the way it is, right? And so when you've got a broker that comes to you and basically says, hey, Jacob, congratulations. You guys had a great year. Your premium didn't go up as high as it did the year previous, but you're still looking at a 20% increase. And a lot of people just be, okay, great. I don't have time for this. Fits into my budget. Let's just go ahead and sign.
Well, it's looked at like a tax.
Yep.
And I would say it's not even that they don't have time for it in a lot of cases that I've seen. It's that, what can I do about it? It's a tax. You pay your taxes, you pay your healthcare.
It's kind of after the fact, right? It's like,
well,
shoot, my tax accountant told me I needed more write-offs in 2025. Oops, I can't go back and do it now.
Well, but your CFO is looking for those write-offs proactively because they're forecasting your revenue and your expenses and what your profit's going to be, and they're looking at those opportunities to reduce your tax liability. And some CFOs get pretty creative with it. Some of them are real geniuses, Actually, a lot of them are. CFOs are great. The problem is they're not doing that with healthcare. Who's looking at your healthcare? Yeah. We talked to a chief health officer earlier this week, and they couldn't really say what their plan was covering or even how many were enrolled in it.
And this was a
chief health officer at a company, a large to mid-sized company.
Wow.
And so they're not getting into the weeds the way that they need to be. And I think that's the call to action is executives, get into the weeds, understand what's happening with your second largest expense. Because if you don't, you're going to keep paying those increases. You're going to keep paying for the cost of this care that it has a lot of waste built into it and a lot of gaps.
Yeah. Yeah. So getting into the weeds is a great way to start understanding your plan, knowing where you can control costs, cut costs, things like that. One thing that Mark Cuban really called out, and I apologize, I do not like to read kind of stuff from here, but I think it's important that we kind of set the precedence for this because Mark Cuban openly admitted that he was paying 8 times more than the necessary generic medication for the Dallas Mavericks, and that his own benefits consultant was costing him millions while keeping him in the dark, meaning that he thought they were always trying to get him the best deal, always trying to get him the best bang for their buck, so to say. And come to find out, he discovered and had that aha moment to really push back on his broker, and the Pandora's box really opened for him. And I think that's probably a good place for a lot of executives to that do want to make change, that do want to control their costs, is to really evaluate their current plan, and then don't be afraid to question.
So I think that's the key thing. So after that call to action of getting into the weeds, then what do you do about it? What's the next step? And I think the next step is, this might come across the wrong way, but be an executive, right? You've got to take control of this and set the direction for your organization. I talked to a director of benefits a few weeks ago, and they, to go back to your analogy, had a healthcare consultant, and they're paying, I think they were paying $1,800, $1,900 a month per employee was their average.
Wow.
So definitely up on the high end.
Yeah.
Very much on the high end. But they were so convinced that they were getting good advice by this healthcare consultant, they just weren't open to any other sort of conversation. And the thing that struck me, and this is a little flippant, but that's the fox guarding the hen house. That healthcare consultant was an employee of their carrier. And that's what most of them are.
Yeah.
A lot of these, because the carrier will say, hey, we'll give you, an optimizer, a consultant, you get concierge plan design, this kind of thing. That's the fox guarding the hen house. And it drives me crazy because it's wrong. It's a direct conflict of interest. So there's definitely a problem there, whether, illegal, I don't know, but like morally it's wrong. But then you're deceiving all these people into thinking they're getting good advice and they have the best plan available. And there's just not a better option out there. I think it's on the executives to dig. Figure out what your plan is doing for your employees, figure out what's not being used, look at where the waste is, and think about how to solve it. And there's lots of ways to solve it. There's lots of companies out there trying to solve it. But the biggest issue that we see is executives aren't willing to get into the weeds, and then they're not willing to say, to commit to a decision. They're not willing to maybe be the bad guy, which is shocking to me on the second highest expense in an organization. Again, you should be controlling that cost. You should be in the weeds. And I think it's just an imperative of being, having financial responsibility for organization.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that too, because, my background being in marketing and stuff like that, many, many moons ago, when companies would, if they didn't have internal people to do their SEO, they would go to an SEO specialized agency. And it's funny because they would just call it the dark arts. It's so complex. It's so this and that. And to be honest, SEO is really, really easy. It's just time consuming, right? And no small business owner or anybody like that has time to do it unless you hire somebody specifically to do that in-house. And so you're forced to have to go outside if you're online and your business is online, right? And it was amazing because I use that a lot because it's like, oh, don't worry, it's just dark arts, we'll take care of it, all this kind of stuff. And it kind of reminds me of how brokers sometimes treat their clients. It's like, it's just the way it is, don't worry about it. Or even to the point of, hey, I got you. This is an overly complex healthcare system. There are so many moving parts to this whole thing. In reality, we can fix our healthcare system. It's just that one department isn't talking to another department, who's not talking to another department. They're not sharing data. They're not being very playful with one another. And so it's causing a lot of rift. There's a lot of things are falling through the cracks, and these are where the gaps start, right? And so that's where Well Trio steps in and starts really helping the gaps. And I think that that's a core missing component that every single plan out there is missing, is that everybody is looking at the data, looking at the strategies post-claim. They're not looking at it pre-claim, right?
Yeah. And of course, this is leading me right into my favorite analogy that I say all the time.
Yep.
I've probably said it every week when we talk.
Yep.
Is the grocery store.
The grocery store analogy.
It's do you want your employees shopping with daddy's credit card and then looking at the receipt after they've consumed the food that they bought? Or do you want somebody going in there with them, clipping coupons, looking for sales, educating them on why this particular item makes sense or that one doesn't, and really optimizing that purchase experience so that the receipt is lower? Obviously that's a better solution. But it does take some guts to implement it. That C-level person, whoever owns benefits, it takes some guts because it's change and it's different, and change is hard.
Yeah.
And I think again, I go back to, that is your job as a C-level person in a company. You have to drive the change. You have to be the one that makes people uncomfortable to make your business better, to make your business more profitable.
Yep. Yep. I agree. And it's interesting too, because this past week, based upon this subject, I've had a few conversations with a variety of different types of brokers. And, one thing interesting conversation that I had with one was kind of reminded me, I have a background in mental health. And so it's really interesting because working in the mental health space with therapists, I even hate to say this, but there are therapists out there that will literally keep you inside your trauma so that they can keep you as a long-term client. And I know that sounds really bad because they are one of your most trusted advisors and professionals that you go to seeking medical mental health with. And unfortunately, there's a lot of them that do that. And then there's the good ones that are always out there that are just like, hey, let's get you in, let's help you deal with your trauma or your addiction, and we'll get you out on your own, but we'll always be here for a resource, right? And I feel like I look at my tax accountant that way. I look at my my travel agent the same way, and that kind of thing. And talking with some of these brokers and kind of just listening to their sales pitch, I guess, of how they do things, it was really interesting because I found a couple brokers that were just like some of these mental health therapists that want to keep you in the dark, that want to not have you look behind the curtain to see what's actually going on. And because maybe it's commission driven, I don't know. Maybe they think that if you look too far into the renewal process, that you're gonna find all the little red flags and the areas of like head scratching, just like Mark Cuban did. He was talking about like a prescription. He was talking. One of the people were telling him that he was helping one of his employees get the best price on a prescription, and come to find out, he was able to get it for $30, and they were paying a premium for it, right? And so it's these kind of things, like, in my opinion, if you're going to be a broker, if you're going to be a service provider, you got to be on your game. You need to be able to discuss and in detail, when asked, where all of the money's going. And it's just not that little black box that everybody...
It's a big black box.
It is a huge black box. And it blows my mind that people are willing to spend millions upon millions upon millions on that black box. And it's like a kid riding the bike with his hands off the handlebar during summertime, cruising down the road, just free flying. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't feel comfortable doing that kind of thing. I mean, it's good every once in a while, but let's be honest. But it's that kind of mentality that I think that is not only doing a disfavor being the fiduciary of your company, and being the steward of the revenue coming in and spending it wisely. I think that it's also kind of a little bit of a disadvantage too, because your employees are the ones that are going to feel it at the end of the day. So,
yeah,
cool.
I think that's spot on.
Yeah. I'm curious, for those that are listening in live and also on the recording, how many of you guys have actually done an audit with your current healthcare plan, or even with your broker, sat down with them and go line by line with some of the data that you guys receive? Have you ever asked that question with a lot of the people that we've talked to?
No, but I can tell certain people that we talk to have done that. And you can tell, I talked to a CFO of a kind of a large bank. This was several months ago. And we had a 15-20 minute conversation. And in that conversation, he knew exactly what percentage of their healthcare spend was going to pharmaceutical, what was going to preventative care, what was going to ER, what was going to urgent care. He knew the people that were spending the most. And he had a very, very deep understanding. And so I think that is kind of the picture perfect CFO as it relates to healthcare. I don't know how he did the rest of his job, but as it relates to healthcare, they should know those things. That should be rolled up in a monthly report. And it's pretty obvious when that happens, because those companies, without any sort of external support, counselor or guidance, they're spending well less than the average. I want to say that bank was spending between 500 and 600 per employee per month on average. They had no outside consultant. They were just paying attention to their costs, and they were saying, okay, GLP-1s are expensive. It's an easy thing to poke at. We have high GLP-1 usage. Well, what do we do about that? Let's talk to HR. Let's talk to the industry. How do we control our GLP-1 cost inside of our healthcare plan? And they decided that, okay, well, GLP-1s really were developed for diabetes, and that's a legitimate, not that, that's what it was designed for. And so they said, all right, well, let's structure our health plan so that we only pay for GLP-1s when it's a diabetic treatment. And that right there, that cuts out tens of thousands of dollars.
For sure.
And you're not hurting your employees by doing that.
Yeah.
Right. Their feelings might be hurt. They might say, oh, I want to lose 50 pounds, 100 pounds, and GLP-1's a fast way to do that. So they might not like it, but that's a tough decision that you've got to make in order to control those costs and to develop a really strong healthcare program.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because in the article, Mark Cuban actually talks about this. He calls it the silent employee tax, right? Because if you're not aware of it, and these prescriptions and things like that for the people that are, the oldest and sickest and all that kind of stuff, if you're not mindful to what's being spent, that gets kind of distributed out across all employees. And it could be one of those silent gaps that create a lot of risk and a lot of cost, if not monitored correctly. And it really impacts at the end of the year when it comes to premium, because if you're spending over your allotted amount, the premium is there with the reserve that the provider requires. That's why your premiums go up each and every year, is because they need to have that buffer. They need to evaluate for the next year, all that kind of stuff. And so to your point, this is a great thing to kind of look at, because it will make your employees a heck of a lot happier, because they don't have to deal with the rising costs to keep the same insurance, or trying to reduce the benefits and try to keep the cost at the same level. It's not a win-win situation. But when you can control what's being spent, how it's being spent, where it's being spent, that's where you can have the win-win situation. But again, it goes back to not post-claim interactions and strategies, it's pre-claim. And I keep going back to that pre-claim because, again, going back to some of these broker questions and conversations that I've been having with brokers this week, is a lot of them understand that there are gaps in benefit programs, but a lot of them are not necessarily focused on creating strategies to cut the cost, change the employee behavior, do things like that. They would rather pay, a few $100 per employee to get a telehealth to try to cut down on emergency room or visits or Instacare visits, or they would rather pay a few $100s to get like a care navigation or a step tracker or, something. They're trying to add AI or an app, and it's not about another app or AI.
You're talking about point solutions.
Solutions.
They look at, okay, what's the big thing? And let's look at that. Let's go after that. What's the next big thing? Let's go after that. To your point about telehealth, a lot of those programs aren't very expensive. You can get a telehealth solution for a couple of dollars per employee per month. Here's the problem. Telehealth will almost always refer the employee to an emergency room. Almost always.
Yep.
In some cases, and I've experienced this, probably you have too, they'll get a doctor on the phone to write a prescription. Pink eye is an easy example. It's easy to diagnose pink eye. You're talking to a parent who's had a few kids. Kids get pink eye. That's an easy prescription they're comfortable to write. But there's not a lot of scenarios where they don't refer to an emergency room. To circle back to your point about the point solutions, I think that's a big part of the problem. As executives try to dig into the healthcare problem for their organization, there's a lack of understanding about how the whole thing works, and it is complex. It is a big black box. It is a system designed to increase cost and increase profit on the back end for those providers, and it's difficult to get in. It's difficult to understand, and I think that's part of the problem because some executives will look at those point solutions, and so I kind of want to speak to like how would you go after controlling costs? How would you get in front of pre-claim data? And just a perfect world, where you have access, and you can make these decisions, and you're an executive who's finally decided, I've got to do something. You're ready to do something. What do you do?
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple of paths to get there. And it depends on a little bit the number of employees you have, but the best thing you can do is switch your organization to a self-funded program.
100%.
Single best thing you can do, because now you have all the visibility you need to all the costs, to who's going where. You own the data. It's your data. It can't be kept from you. This is just eye-opening to a lot of organizations, a lot of CFOs. And you don't have to change your plan to do that. It does trigger an open enrollment, but what I mean is you don't have to change the benefits inside of your plan. So if your co-pays and deductibles and premiums and everything, you can keep all of those exactly the same. So to the employee, they just get a new insurance card. It works the same way. It's the same benefits. But on the back end, now you have access and visibility to the data. Over the long term, and by long term, I would say over a year, that is an extremely safe option. It's viewed as like a challenge or risky, a lot of times by people who maybe don't fully understand it. And it can be a little bit nerve-wracking in the beginning, because you think to yourself, oh, these claims are coming in. The company is paying for those claims directly. That's the self-funded part. What happens if I get a huge claim in the first month, the first couple of months, where I can't afford it? I don't have the cash reserves. There is some planning that has to happen for that, but generally speaking, that's not a problem. You control that risk with stop loss, which also called reinsurance. So if you're not sure if that's right for you, or you're an executive looking to make a change and figure out what to do, talk to your broker about being self-funded. That's my call to action. Talk to your broker about being self-funded if you're not.
That's a good one. And the cool part too is just like, you don't have to have thousands or hundreds or thousands of employees to go self-funded.
No.
We've got clients that are 10 people all the way up to like 50 people before you hit the federal requirement to then offer group plans of 50 and above. But you can offer self-funded plans below, and it just needs to make sense. Revenue and commitment and things like that. But in the long run, I agree. It's like one of the safest models out there.
If you're paying for group insurance right now, if you're paying for a fully funded plan, switch to self-funded, and in a year, you're almost guaranteed to save 20% or more with changing nothing else. Switch to self-funded, you'll save 20% or more. Now, each month is going to vary, because you pay claims as they come in. So the months are going to be up and down. You control that risk with the stop loss, but you will automatically, in most cases, save about 20%. And it's, if you do Google search on when should I be self-funded? When does it make sense for a company to become self-funded? When should I switch from fully funded to self-funded? Any of those types of things. A lot of results will show down as low as 20 employees should move self-funded.
Yeah.
And there's programs out there to do it. There's programs that will help bridge that cost, right? If you think, okay, well, in the first few months, before I build up my healthcare war chest, how am I going to cover that cost? There's companies that'll help you cover it. there's bridge loans, there's a lot that you can do. You can control your reinsurance thresholds. You can bring those down because the cost of reinsurance is less than 10% of the premium cost on a fully funded plan. So what that means is if you bring that reinsurance threshold lower to make your cap lower and reduce your risk, yes, there's going to be an increase to that reinsurance premium, but the increase is on such a small percent of the overall cost of the plan that it's relatively insignificant. And a good broker will help you structure that. Mm-hmm. And as time goes on, so for the following year, maybe you want to bring that up, save yourself literally $20 a month per employee. That's the adjustment. It's really not that much to adjust that reinsurance.
And I think it would be interesting to explain why they're able to save the 20%, because what's hidden in those fully funded. We're probably going to be put on a couple of hit lists here with major providers, but I think it's important for them to understand why by just switching, keeping the same plan, but just switching between a fully funded and a self-funded, and the repayment structure alone automatically saves them 20%.
Yeah. So really it comes down to who's accepting the risk for those claims. And when you're on a fully funded plan, the carrier accepts those risks. So, Blue Cross or whatever, Aetna, I don't want to call anybody out specifically, but that we all know the carriers, they're accepting the risk. Mm-hmm. And they should be compensated for that, right? If something crazy happens to one of your employees, even if nothing crazy happens, the other day I was talking to somebody, they had a baby was born premature with a neurological issue. That whole NICU stay, that whole process cost them just under $1 million in the span of just a few days. Mm-hmm. People look at that and they get scared, right? A self-funded plan would say, oh, shoot, the CFO's heart is racing at that point, right? How do I solve this? Well, that's the reinsurance saves you from that. But if you still have to pay up to that reinsurance threshold, instead of having a steady, predictable cost each month out of the plan year, now your cost is going to go up or down, and it could go up to the level of that reinsurance. When you're fully funded, the carrier takes all that risk, and they build in a nice little profit margin for themselves for doing it. That's where that 20% goes, and so you can automatically shift that risk to yourself. You can manage the risk, so you're not going outside of your budget or your parameters, and save all that, basically the cost of the risk on the outside. And then that's the short version. That's the short gain. The long-term gain is, like we talked about earlier, that access to your claim data, because now what's being used inside of your plan and how much it's costing you. So there's a lot of examples of plans that will have the analogy I like is you buy a new car. So when you buy a brand new car, you kind of get the package, you choose your trim level. I bought a new car a few years ago, and it has, I'm trying to remember the options that I don't use. It's got so many options that, like, they're kind of fun to click around in, but I couldn't care less about them, really. They're just interesting. But I paid for them. Why did I pay for them? Well, because I didn't think I had a choice to take them out. And then there were a couple options I really wanted that just weren't in the package. I couldn't have had it. Auto dimming headlights, for whatever dumb reason, on a brand new car 2 years ago, were not included. I'm like, well, I want auto dimming headlights. Like, this is, how does that not a thing?
Yeah.
And they just said, well, it's just not. I can't add it. It's not an aftermarket. They said no. And I have no idea what the limitation was. I assume some technical limitation. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the point is, you're stuck in that ecosystem of paying for things you don't want and not getting things you need when you're buying a package off the shelf.
Yeah.
In a fully funded plan. So when you do a self-funded plan, you have a lot of flexibility and control where you can cherry pick those features that you want, and you can cherry pick the features you don't want, and you can set thresholds for, another easy example is emergency room visit. So if this was a case we talked about, or I talked with this group a month or two ago. They have basically no cost for emergency room visit. And the idea was from HR that we want to make sure people are taken care of in an emergency and they don't have to worry about like, what's it going to cost me? They want the employee to feel really good about the care that they're getting, right? And that they can go and do this without creating a financial hardship for themselves. Well, the problem is then what are they incentivizing?
Mm-hmm.
They're incentivizing that emergency room visit. So how do you structure a plan that takes that pressure off the employee, takes the stress off the employee, makes them feel valued and cared for? At the same time, you've got to control your costs and not incentivize the wrong behavior. So what if you put a phone call in between the emergency room visit and the patient, or the employee? So now they've just got to call and get approval to go to the emergency room, then it's free, right? Obviously that doesn't work. You cut your leg off, you're not making a phone call. You get in a skiing accident, you're unconscious, you're not making a phone call. That's fine. Go, a lot of times plans will set up to waive that fee for situations like that. But that's one easy example where now if somebody has a cough or a rash, their first thought isn't the emergency room, because that's going to cost me $1,000. I've got to call my health coach or my nurse or whoever it is.
Well, even before that, they might think go to Instacare or something like that.
Yes, exactly. So now you're incentivizing cheaper behavior that still keeps that employee safe and keeps them healthy. And you're building this system now that is controlling costs and taking care of the employee. And that's the beauty of a self-funded plan. You can do those things. You can get very creative with that self-funded plan.
And to kind of go along with that, I think it's important to point out that a lot of people are not risk takers, right? They like the consistency, they like the payments,
especially CFOs. They want predictability.
They want predictability, no right? I think it's important to, and you kind of alluded to it as well, but with fully funded plans, you've got this level premium amount that you need to pay per employee per month throughout the year, right? And to your point, the provider's the one that's taking the risk, and so they're putting in their margins to account for this risk, right? But at the end of the year, who gets to keep the remaining budget? They do, not you. So you're paying for that convenience, that luxury to have that sustained amount. But to be honest, you could do the exact same thing with a self-funded. And the best part is, it's not like a tax return where you get a refund at the end of the year. It's just that you control your costs throughout the year. And to your point, it goes up and it goes down. But on the flip side of that too I like to call it I'm not a huge PC fan, but it's the Microsoft effect, right? If you buy a computer with Microsoft on it, it comes with so many apps already pre-installed, ready to go for you. So it's kind of like your car analogy. But if you've ever used a PC before, after time, it gets so bloated and bogged down, you have to wipe it almost every year just to kind of keep it working properly, right? And to me, I use that analogy when I was talking to a business owner that had 15 people, was paying 100% of their employees because they realized the value of having great benefits to retain good employees. So he was covering 100% of his employees' benefits. And the crazy part is these are 19, 20, 22, 26. I think the oldest was 27, and then him who's in his 50s, right? So he's got a very young employee age demographic. And the crazy part is like he said, nope, I'm all about the consistency across the board. I do my own books, so he's wearing multiple hats. And I can see why he likes that consistency. But at the end of the day, after I got talking to him, and he just went off the rails. He's just like, I'm paying, $1,300 for these kids and their families, for really good health insurance. I'm paying $1,300 a month for their premiums, and none of them are using their insurance. So I said, well, what if you switch to a self-funded plan? If they use it, great. If they don't, you save tremendously, right? And that's one of the big benefits is to going to self-funded, because you are control. and we're on a fully funded plan, all these bloated kind of things that you build into the benefits plan and all this kind of stuff, it's almost like you're paying those yearly SaaS subscriptions for the whole year, and you have to pay for it for the whole year, even if you're going to use it or not, right? But with a self-funded, you can make those shifts. No one's using acupuncture. We're spending a few bucks to participate in this service. Nobody's using it. Okay, great. Let's cancel that service mid-year or after the first quarter because no one's using it. And let's put it into gym memberships. Let's put it into chiropractic. Let's you know what? People have been wanting orthodontia. So let's go through and beef up our dental plan or even our vision plan, type of thing. Or, hey, let's just give them $100 credit that they can put into an HSA account or something like that, right?
We talked to somebody yesterday, you and I, who what he wants to do is push all that extra money into salaries. He wants to compensate his employees more, but they can't afford to because of the healthcare costs. And so his strategy is let's reduce our healthcare spend and let's shift some of that budget into employee salaries. Let's use that as a recruiting tool, retention tool, keep people happy. Let's give raises to be competitive. And so I thought that as a great strategy. There's a lot of things you can do with that extra budget that are deeply meaningful to people.
For sure. And it's nothing more out of pocket for them.
Right.
That's the best part.
Right.
So if you're seriously thinking about wanting to control your healthcare, I mean, that is a great opportunity to start with, is just really considering move to a self-funding. And it's almost like going out on your own and starting your own business, right? You're in full control. It is a little bit scary, but in reality, the upside a lot of times are more impactful for you financially and beneficially. But
I
then
push back on that.
There are some people out there that do not like that, the anxiety that comes with it. They would rather not have that, and they're just the ones that like the comfort of having a stable income, a stable job. But to be honest, like these days, you don't know if you're going to walk in on a Monday or a Friday and have a nice little pink slip sitting or a box sitting on your desk saying, come see HR. That's the drawback with self-funded and being a business owner. You can kind of see a little ways into the future and have a little bit more control over that.
Yeah, I want to push back on that because
I knew you would. I love it. Let's get a hot take here.
Because moving to self-funded from a fully funded plan, it's not even a comparison. There's no comparison with how safe that decision is relative to starting a business or your employment if you're an employee. Not even a comparison. When you move to a self-funded plan, there's almost no scenario where you're going to lose money.
Right.
You're going to save money, and you're going to be able to tailor that plan to your employees, and you're going to be able to offer better benefits over time. Maybe not the first year because you're building up the war chest. You're nervous. You want to keep benefits maybe the same. You want to protect that margin that now you're not paying that goes into your healthcare war chest. But over time, every single one of our clients, over time, they're paying less and less every year for healthcare. Not even that their reductions are lower. They're paying less every year. And so they're able to use that money for the things like you mentioned.
Friday pizza parties.
Yeah. So moving to a self-funded plan is just significantly safer. I mean, I don't want to say it's a never lose proposition, but in almost all cases, it's a win.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that, especially from you being able to control, and you're not just floating money out there. You're just not throwing money down the drain kind of deal. It's interesting because you've got all these like new kind of like car apps that say, hey, check your car insurance, see how well you're comparing, see if you can lower your rate because you get thrown into these pools, right? And I guess from what I got from Mark Cuban and from our conversation today is it's 100% okay to push back on your broker, ask the hard questions. Even if you don't know what questions to ask, Google it.
I would say it's not just okay. You're failing your responsibility if you don't.
Good point.
I mean, it's not just okay. You should be. And it goes back to one of the first points I made. It's your responsibility as an executive to make those tough calls, ask hard questions, get into the weeds. You don't need to understand it all, but you should be asking the questions and making sure you're getting the best value out of your plan. And I think you're failing in your responsibility if you don't do that.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, for those that are just listening that might be considering moving from a fully funded plan into a self-funded, or even just from no insurance or even just like a stipend type of deal into a group plan, how hard is it really to get into a self-funded plan? And how long does it take?
Yeah, I mean, it is. You work with your broker to do this, and it's easy to switch into self-funded. There's boxes you got to check to make it happen properly. Broker helps you with that. There's services that help you with that. Trio will help you with that, but you need your broker, and it's pretty easy, and you can do it whenever you want. So changing the plan is something, as an employer, you could do that mid-year. You don't have to wait for open enrollment. So, this time of year, we're April, you've now had a couple of months of your higher premiums, your increase from last year. There's actually nothing stopping you from talking to your broker about a self-funded plan. Make a mid-year change.
Right.
There's potentially a lot of opportunity there, and there's no reason why not to. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more work. You've got to kind of go through open enrollment again. A company like Trio will help facilitate that. Your broker will help facilitate that. And you got to look at the benefit, the cost benefit. Your cost is going to be time. The benefit is going to be significant savings and an improvement to the plan.
Yeah. I agree with that. I'm just, we're coming up on the top of the hour, so I want to be mindful of that. But there are just so many golden nuggets that are in this article about Mark Cuban and his experience. And you got to have confidence in the people that are helping you manage this. So, one of the things that I do like about Trio is, yes, we focus on the pre-claim. We focus on employee relationships because honestly, that's the only way to really cut costs, is changing behaviors and closing the gaps. But in reality with that too is having a partner like Trio that can field HR calls and field broker calls with questions and things like that. So I know we've gotten a couple of we've worked with a couple of different brokers just recently with onboarding employees because of their enrollment periods, because it just doesn't happen in November, folks. It can happen throughout the whole year. And so for us being able to help out with the whole enrollment thing, we've gotten so much feedback from HR and the broker of what a great experience that was. And we're rolling out a new case study here, and even talking to employees, they talked about how easy it was compared to previous companies that they've been with. And so that's the kind of synergy that Trio likes to create, with working with brokers, working with HR, working with the business owners, and most importantly, working with the employee, because they're the ones that we want to provide the best experience. The healthcare is, it's like a financial thing, right? It's a big decision. It's something that big, when you buy a house, it's a big decision. It's something that you go in, but healthcare is kind of another big thing that happens in your life. And sometimes those catastrophic events happen that you don't know. And it's always nice to have somebody on your side. And it's funny because when I was doing these interviews for this case study, there were a few of the single employees that said that they were making their Trio health advocate coach their point of emergency contact, which I thought was awesome. And then it got me thinking of, like, why wouldn't you, right? Especially if you're single, because at the end of the day, like, if I get into a car wreck and they find my point of contact, emergency contact, that Well Trio coach is going to be on the ball, organizing, helping you through navigate through all the process, help you, educate you on what's happening, being there to support you, following up, which I think is another big differentiator between us and other AI app, is that we have that human in the loop touch and the follow-up, which I think is huge, because who wants to talk to Claude or ChatGPT and say, hey, how are you doing, right? There's no emotion, there's no emotional connection. And that's why a lot of people are fall in love with that. And I think that is something that has been lost in translation with the healthcare system across the board. I feel like we've moved to more automated and that kind of stuff, where we still need hands-on, one-on-one. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree. We talked about that a little bit last week, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more, about the role of AI and automation, and how I think solutions are going to be more personal. The facing part of the customer facing part of the solution is going to have to be relationship based, because the tech has to live behind the scenes. The tech has to enable the relationship, not be the relationship.
It's the tool. It's the tool.
It's the tool. Exactly.
Yeah. So cool.
This has been great.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Anything else you want to you want to say versus what we've talked about? Yeah, we're a little bit over time, but we want to thank all of you guys for tuning in. Again, this is kind of like Jacob and I's weekly diary, I guess, of what we've kind of seen and heard and experienced throughout the week. I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts on topics you want us to kind of cover, or areas that you guys want us to go down in the rabbit hole. Jacob and I love going down rabbit holes. We talk all the time about various subjects and things like that. And we are both pretty passionate about trying to fix this healthcare system. And it's going to be a team effort. That's for sure. It's not one solution. It's a coordination of getting everybody on the same page. We like to use the analogy of, you guys have probably heard it too, getting everybody on the bus, right? But it's not necessarily just getting the right people on the bus. It's getting them in the right seat on the bus to make that synergy, just so that the experience is good and we can fly down the street, down the road. So, cool. What should we talk about next week?
We'll figure it out.
All right. Sounds good. Until then, guys, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you. And definitely check out welltrio.com to learn more about our sponsor of Benefits 3.0 and the Behind the Premium podcast. And make sure that you like and subscribe, comment below to help us beat those algorithms of YouTube and all the other social media channels as well. Until next week we're going to be moving this 10:30. We're shifting back a half hour. Yeah. Mountain time. We'll see you then. And then every other Wednesday at 4 p.m. Mountain time, we do our roundtable discussions, which are also really cool. We invite HR, brokers, C-level, business owners, you name it. We get them all in because they come in from a various point of views. So it's a really fun discussion as well. So, and if you're interested in participating, if you're a broker, HR, business owner, reach out to us in the DMs. We'll be happy to get you up on and registered as a panelist. So until then, see you guys. Have a great one. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.